Christian family, not a Christ-centered family. We went to church 3 times a week. Well, back then it was Saturday or Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. And my mom did believe in God. I mean, but it always seems like when we needed some help. And so my dad died when I was before I was 2, and so it was hard growing up without a father. I watched my mom work 3 jobs, and she was constantly gone. I used to be a latchkey kid. But for me, I'm recovering now for 25 plus years. I started drinking when I was 11. A family friend gave me beer, and I drank it. And I was like a fish out of water. My dad was a severe alcoholic, and my brother was too. My brother is 10 years older than me, so it just a family curse through the male side of our family. But not only am I recovering from alcohol, and alcohol wasn't the main thing I loved. I loved Satan. I was a Satanist for about 7-8 years. Loved everything about it. Loved him. And for a long time I would never admit. I'd always say, I was a Satanist. But over my last 2 testimonies, God has, wants me to get deeper into how I felt. I started seeing demons when I was 9, and they would actually come and talk to me, and they'd always tell me they were proud of me, and Satan was proud of me and all this. And at the time, I never had anybody in my life tell me they were proud of me. So I can remember going to my mom and my preacher at the time, and I heard all it's your imagination. You're just you got a good imagination, and it's you're dreaming this. You're not seeing any of this, but unfortunately, he is real, and nobody who had the power at the time to stand up and help out. So I just kept going deeper into Satan, and when I was 12, my mom put me in a Christian school, and matter of fact, I graduated from a Christian school. And during that time, I got deeper into Satanism, and I also started drinking heavier. And during that time, through my teenage years, that's when I bought my satanic Bible. I started learning how to do curses. I started learning just what, I always felt how good Satan was to me, because my dad beat my mom very severely, all the way to the time he passed away. So he would beat her so bad sometimes that my older siblings, my oldest sister's 13 years older, so she can remember. My brother was 10 years older than me, and then I have a sister 8 years older than me. So they all could remember that he would beat my mom so bad she would run from the house, and then later that night she would come back and crawl through my oldest sister's window and crawl under the bed and go to sleep until he went to work the next morning. So my mom had a lot of hate, and it was directed at me because I was my dad's son. So not to say my mom didn't love me sometimes. It definitely was, but there was a big how she treated me and my I'm the baby of the family, but my closest sister to me is 2 years older. So she got all the perks, and I got what was left. And we would go to church. While we were at church, I was pretty good at athletics. I used to bodybuild, but at church I was a great son. He does good at football. Look at him, strong. But then when I got home, it was totally different. So growing up, everybody was always saying Satan is this, he's bad. And the same people who are telling me Satan is bad are the ones that treat me bad. So, and they were telling me God was good. So I was like, that's not going to work for me, because I was like, if they're doing this, I don't want to be like that. So I went the way of Satan. And, during those times, let me tell you something, Satan gave me everything but I wanted. I thought I had great friends and, jobs throughout my life and opportunities and beautiful women. and everything else. And I truly loved him, just like how anybody would love God. And, that's pretty hard to say because nobody ever wants to hear someone, you love Satan. And I did. Loved him for, most of my youth into my mid-20s. And then, as I got older, my hate for God just grew more and more and more. And then, I met a warlock. He started teaching me things. And then I was able to learn how to curse the so-called Christians in my school who were always trying to bully me around and everything else. And then when I realized, wow, this works. I can do stuff to people and not get caught. I loved it, And, I'd watch their lives fall apart, and I just thought it was the best thing that ever happened to me, And so I just kept going deeper and deeper into Satanism. And then, you start learning how to call up demons, summon demons, and then you start learning more about the spells, and, and then Satan starts bringing all these other people, who are a lot more powerful than you, can show you the things, and then they realize, I had the heart for the dark. I loved it. It was just natural to me, anytime that, anybody had any problems, like, in your neighborhoods or something, someone would say that place is haunted or this. I would always be the first one to want to go over there and see what it is. And, and that time, it was great. And as I was going through a Christian school, I was just getting deeper into Satanism. And, I about 16, 17, when I was getting ready to graduate from school, that's when I started going to parties, and just then my drinking was out of control. I would wake up, at somebody's house and didn't even know where I was. And I was just my morality just went away. I used to pride myself on trying to treat people good. And then I began to realize I didn't care. Whatever I could get for myself, I got. And if I felt like you crossed me, well, I knew how to call on a demon to take care of that. I got into astroplaning, and doing all just getting deeper and deeper into things. People say it's not real. It is real. So as I got deeper into this, it was, you start not caring about life itself either. And I began to realize that, even like when you go through your life in sin, or maybe even now, if some of you are not saved, you can still hear that small voice of God. And you can hear it, talking to you. And there was different times the whole time I did this that God would send someone to me, or I would hear, a preaching, at home. My mom would always leave the radio on, Christian channels, and, it bugged me for just a minute, and then it was gone. And then, so during this time, my older sister, who's that's closer to me, I began to use her as a project. I would call up demons to go, not hurt her, but scare her, because me and her just couldn't get along. Because plus she was the golden child, and it made me mad. So if she was here, she would tell you about the times that she would hear voices outside the window. We lived in a 2-story house, and her room was at the top, and she could hear a voice like, come out, let's talk. And by the end of it all, she actually moved in with one of my sisters for a while until she got married, and then just moved away. And that's I look back on that, and to all the people I hurt, and to my sister, I was like, you called on a demon to go take care of this. You actually sent a demon to somebody. It's not a spell. A spell is casting a demon towards somebody. It's not just words. You're sending a thing. And, a lot of people's lives that I went after, some of them never recovered. Maybe now it has. It's been years, but I know for a long time that I saw them flounder, and just think nothing ever went right. And at the time, it brought me happiness because I was the one that did it, and I thought to myself, you shouldn't have did what you did to me. And so once I graduated from school, that's when the drinking and partying really started going on, and I met another warlock, and I was getting deeper into Satanism, and I learned what demons can and can't do, which I will tell you this, even because you're in a church, demons can come into a church if it's invited by somebody. That won't stop it. That's how a lot of churches implode. They don't, people just don't, they think they stop at the door, they're not coming in. No, they'll come in if they're invited. But once they get inside, they'll tear a church up. And, that's, I always call them church wolves. They'll come in and they'll tear friendships up, pastors, relationships and everything else. So I try to always tell people that, a demon can go wherever it's invited. And so for me, as once I got out, I started partying harder, started sleeping around, and since I had graduated, then I would just go out and I would wake up in bed with girls I didn't know, and then I realized that I had all this sex that was unprotected. Then for 3 or 4 years of my life, my routine was drink, work, go sleep with women I didn't know, go visit the doctor, make sure I didn't get an STD. And then that was for years. And I never, and finally it just never dawned on me, what are you doing to yourself? But that was what, I didn't realize that's what Satan was doing. He was just destroying my body. I got out of weightlifting, I got out of, just working out, things I used to love to do. And anybody who was my good friends that would try to tell me stuff was going on, I just wouldn't listen. I just pushed them aside. And so during those times, I met, through my nephew, I met a guy named Mark, and real nice guy. They're probably like a year or two younger than me. And for maybe a year or so, just hung out with him, really nice, I thought was nice. And then I hadn't seen him for a while, and then I saw on the news that this guy Mark and a friend of his had went to his dad's house. Mark shot his dad, shot his fiance, and cut the fiance's 2 little girls' throats. His friend got the death penalty. He's already been put to death, and Mark got life. And that shocked me because I never heard of that. I grew up in Pelham. Pelham at the time was nothing but cornfields and a couple of gas stations. You never heard that. And I would just remember thinking, it just shocked me so bad that, a guy I knew, a guy I hung out with and talked to all the time, just killed 4 people. But you thought I learned, but I didn't. And I just kept going. I put it aside. I felt guilty for a while. And, I knew what was going on. And it was not long after that I was at another party, and I met 4 guys. And it was just the only time I've ever met them. Talked to them the whole night. And went long after that day on the news. A female hitchhiker was kidnapped. They killed her for the fun of it. And I was just like, man. Then you start realizing death is coming all around you. And then I began to get scared because I began to realize that some of the demons I was calling up, they wasn't doing what I wanted them to do sometimes. And, and then you begin to realize, you always hear people say, you put salt around you, which even then I didn't believe it, salt ain't going to stop a demon. I always tell my friends, the only way you can use, you got to use the good salt. You use the bad salt or the Dollar General salt, they'll come right over and kill you. So, and through some of the parties, I started hearing about animal sacrifices and human sacrifices. I was like, no, that's not for me. I'd go home and sacrifice a ham sandwich, you know, and that's what I would do. But those were the people it was a different level. But I began to see that's where I could head if I didn't stop what I was doing. And that began to scare me. But don't worry, it didn't stop me. I kept going. So, and during this time after I saw all this, I can remember, I'm sure it happened more than what I remember, but I remember 2 times I got possessed. I can tell you what it's like. It's like looking down a long corridor. I could see where my eyes moved. I could see my hands. I could hear my voice. But I couldn't stop what I was doing. And it was the most terrifying thing that I've ever experienced. And you thought I would learn after the first time. After the first time when I came back and people told me what I had said, because sometimes you don't remember. Like there's so many other times I got possessed I couldn't remember. And good friends I hurt. People I just downed because, I was just possessed and I was being mean. And for a long time I was like, well, it wasn't my fault. But I always tell people it was my fault because I chose Satan and I knew what could happen and I didn't stop it. So I started realizing my name was, just becoming mud. And, it was, I was quitting job after job. I was losing relationship after relationship. And I lost a lot of good jobs and a lot of good women in my life that would have, changed my life when I was early. And I just didn't stop. And it was, by then, you just get kind of, used to the thrill of what can Satan bring next? Because every time I'd start getting low, man, I would meet somebody and then, always come into money, always go do this, go do things I never thought I could do. And, but, it just began to destroy me. And so for me, when as I call the downfall was, I began to think about suicide a lot. And, I never told my wife this because, I just said, you come out, you get depressed, you look at yourself, you look like crap. And I was like, oh, God, I'm tired of this. But the actuality was, I never thought about hell. The whole time I was serving Satan, I never thought about hell and what it was like or what would it be like if I went. I thought, it must be like heaven because everybody said God and you went to heaven, it was great. So hell had to be the same. But as through the murders and through just my own self starting to become destroyed, you can only drink and not sleep for long. And things just begin to wear out on you when people start abandoning you, the people that were good to you. And I begin to realize that, I've probably need to rethink my life. And but then when the suicide started going, I was like, well, I started really pondering it. And I can remember that, when we go meet and do our spells casting and stuff like picking somebody out to go after, which I will tell you also is if you're a true Christian and a Satanist tries to cast a spell on you, it's not going to work. And in a lot of cases, I saw that demon they send out to go get that person actually came back and attacked that person. And I saw a couple of those, and those were terrifying. And so, you see all this, and then you realize, demons come back attacking the people that sent them out to go do something against a Christian, and then you're going, how's this? Why can't this demonic being beat this person over here? And then, the light starts kicking on because like at the school, we had chapel, and I can remember some of those things where God would, you could hear God is the most powerful one. God made Satan. Now the only thing bad about Satan can't create anything new. He does the exact opposite of God, and he makes it, he'll destroy a marriage and make it look like this, whatever's good, he's going to make it bad, and he's going to make it evil. So, as I began to realize and it began to dawn on me, I was like, and then the suicide thoughts were coming against me. Then I realized I don't have nobody to talk to, because all my friends that were still the group we were in, they were kind of superficial on how they just wanted to do service things. I was the one that wanted to go deeper. How did things work, and all that. So to them, they're still having a great time. I realized that a lot of demons that I was, like I said, I was calling up were all of a sudden were not doing what I asked them to do, and then you're sitting there going, I have no protection. What do I do? Who to call on? So, during that time when I finally just said, you know what? I went on a 3-day drinking binge. I know I went to work. I can remember coming home and taking a shower, but I don't remember anything at work. And so I guess I must have did a good job, because I never got fired. And 3 days. I don't know what I did those 3 days, but I remember the third day going into. I went over to a friend's house, and they gave me some. I don't know if you can. Can you say the name of a drug? They gave me acid, and I got. And lucky me, I got a bad hit. And if you ever had a bad hit of acid, it will tear you up. I mean, it will. It made all my joints hurt, and I was lucky because the guy's trailer I went to, he had different color lights in every room, so then it freaked me out. And then I remember thinking they were. I don't. To this day, I don't know. When I was in one room or another, I thought, man, they're talking about me in there. And so I went outside, and my friend had an old 86 LTD. If any of you know what those are not plastic. Those are metal. And I decided to see if I could put my hand through his hood, his trunk, right on the crevice, and broke my hand. And after that happened, I remember then I was in pain. I was already in enough pain from the drug, and then to know I just broke my hand, and then I went back in there. I was talking to him. I was like, I'm starting to freak out. Something's going wrong here, and being the true friends they all left me there, and I mean every one of them. And I went into a bedroom that, in one of the bedrooms, and I remember sitting on the bed, and I asked God. I said, if you are real. If you're it, I said, because I thought I was going to die. It felt like I was dead. I was like, if you allow me to live, I will find the first church in the morning, and I will go talk to a pastor. And, naturally let me live. So I went, and that would begin, me getting out of Satanism. And when I finally got out of, it, and out of the fog I was in, and I said, I'm done with this. I went home after talking to the pastor, grabbed all my book of spells, my satanic Bible, and everything, and I took it outside to burn it. My mom, thank God, who's still alive. Thank God my mom's still alive. She will tell you the story. My wife didn't believe me. I went outside, poured gas on it, poured it on the pages, threw a match on it. The fire jumped off of it, burned around it. Did it 3 different times, and I couldn't burn it. So I went inside and told my mom, I said, I can't burn this. I need your help. So she didn't believe me. So we went back out. I did it in front of her, and the fire would jump off. So I gassed it down again. I said, you're going to have to do this. She threw the match on it. It caught fire and started screaming. And my mom's in her 80s now, so she will still remember that to this day, how bad it frightened her. But even though after I got all that, then I got, when I was younger, I never got sick, ever. I was just one of the blessed ones. And I got sick for 2 weeks to the point I couldn't even get up, hardly out of bed, and go to the bathroom. And I remember I had a chow dog, and he was an inside dog, and nobody was home one day, and he come running up and jumped in my bed, and he was growling. I looked up, and there was a demon that was outside my room, and it told me he was going to kill me. it said, it went into a big spill of how what Satan had put into me, all the things he had brought to me, and for me to betray him, I was going to have to die. He gave me everything I wanted. It was time for me to pay with my life, and it was one of those times. That's the first time I didn't know. I just called on Jesus, and I remember he disappeared. That was it. And it still took me a while to get over it. The sickness. I was sick for like another week after that happened. But when I got, and I thought to myself when I got saved, how you get all pumped up and go, and I started going to the pastor saying, "Guess what? I used to be an ex-Satanist. We need you to leave the church. We don't want you here." And I remember thinking, "Wow, I didn't know why or understood." And 3 different churches did that to me once they found out I was an ex-Satanist. They didn't want. One told me he didn't want my kind around, even though I had already gave my life to Christ. You knew I did, but that's when I realized that most pastors and a lot of churches are scared of the demonic realm. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want you to know about it, and that's very shameful, because you need to know. You need to realize that the music you listen to, the videos, all this, you hear regular preachers say it, and I guys at work, I still laugh about it, but I always remind them. You had to remember, David played for Saul to chase the demon away. So if music can chase a demon away, music can bring a demon in. And so, for years, even after I got out of Satanism, I struggled because I could never tell people the truth. I'd always tell people God delivered me from being an alcoholic. And the night that I asked God to save me, I never had a desire for alcohol again. Never got drunk again. Never did anything. So for years, it went on until maybe like 5-6 years ago. I don't know if y'all know Daniel Oldham or Michelle Oldham. You do? He pestered me for like 2 years to give my testimony, and I was like, I'm not going to get up there and tell people I was a former Satanist, because I don't feel like getting kicked out again. I was like, and he was like, "Man, do it." And I did it, scared. And a lot of people came up to me and started talking to me. And then, the last 2 years, she'll tell you, I've probably been to 7 different churches. God has opened at the door. I told God, I was like, because I went around and preached Satan to, my fellow, human beings. Would go to a party. Satan loves you. Yeah. It sounds sick to say now, but that's what I would say. I'm like, the things you're hearing about God is a lie. He's a liar. His followers are a liar. But I know for a fact Satan is it. And I remember all those times. God brought all those times in my head. So I was like, okay, if I can do that for Satan, I can do that. But now I can start doing things for God. And he's opened up the doors the last couple of years for me to be able to say that. And like I said, for many years after I did, I'd never would admit to that I was a Satanist, or much less say that I love Satan. But God brought all that out, 4 or 5 years ago, and the years before that, 2018, I dated my wife for on and off for 4 years, and during 2018. I was going through I was just real tired all the time, and she'd always tell me to go to the doctor. I went to the doctor. I'm getting fat, getting old, and she told me to go to her doctor, and I did. And the first time I went to a doctor, they found out I had cancer. And my other doctor, who I've been going to 15 years, totally ignored it. And so, and the funny thing is I found out on a Tuesday in December I'm sorry, it was November of 2019. It was that Thursday before I found out. I had just signed and started moving into my new house. So the very next 4 days later, I found out I had cancer, and this is the first time that I can really remember just asking God, for direction and just, you know, what do? You just filed cancer. Now I got to have surgery. I had cancer of the kidney. They had to remove one of my kidneys. And the downtime is 2 months missed and over a year before I could do anything hard. I couldn't even lift up a gallon of milk. So I was like, this is not good. And the company I worked for, he when I told him what I had, the 2 months I was out, they kept paying me a paycheck. Never stopped, so I never fell behind on my bills. I kept paying my house, and I was able to pay them all back. But that just showed me, all the years that, I doubted God, getting kicked out of churches, and realizing that some churches don't want to hear the truth about everything. And all of a sudden, God, here He is. He's paying my bills. They removed the kidney. I didn't have to go through chemo or radiation because they called it at stage 2. And then, he saved me and delivered me through that. And then I just realized that at that time I was like, my God. All the time, you just look back, and God to me was that person in your family you just beat around for a long time. You lied to, you stole from. Well, that was God to me, because I had just stole from Him and I felt like I had just beat Him around. And for Him just to love me and to deliver me from cancer, it cost me a kidney, but that's okay. But He paid my bills, and He just showed me. And then over the last 3 years, God has just allowed me to come talk to people like you. And just, if you're going through anything, or, like that, secret you keep to yourself, that the ones you think people would just be like, oh my God, if they knew the truth about me, they would never talk to me or look at me. I would tell you this, that is a lie from Satan. And that is the biggest way he's always going to keep you under his control. And, I just encourage you to always look toward God, always thank Him for everything, and just remember He sent His only Son to die for us. So I thank you for allowing me to speak to you, and I appreciate you, and I thank you very much.